let's look at our traffic flow because it's still pretty good at 92%. So you've started your first city in Cities Skylines, and it's coming along nicely. What comes next? If you're new here, I'm Diana, and welcome to Sandy Beach, a vanilla build for beginners to the game. Since we've hit the Boomtown milestone, it's time to expand the city. At this point, good planning is important, and every decision you make at this stage will affect how your city functions and grows later on, so we are going to expand quickly. We're going to lay out a pattern mirroring the roads here, and then bring in a few collector roads. I'll talk about road hierarchy for a minute. So as you can see, these two couplets, they're functioning as what's called an arterial, which connects to the highway to bring in traffic from outside. The arterial is sort of the main high-speed road. And then we're going to bring in what's called collectors. It's usually 4 lanes, and it brings in traffic from the arterials into the rest of the local roads in the city. We're going to build more further out to make sure that the city is properly planned. I'm going to start with this road right here. And we're actually going to go from here all the way out. And this is going to create a nice little circular pattern. And you see we have a little bit of terrain ugliness here. We're going to fix that. And so how we're going to do that is just take this brush here, right-click at the height you want, and we're going to level this out. And because we have some terrain here, we're actually going to follow this line when we draw in the road. So I'm going to show you our terrain heights info view. And for this, we go here, and then we're going to use this freeform tool to follow along the side of this ridge. And that'll give us a nice organic design. Next, we're going to connect this road straight up to here. It all looks good to me. It's a little steep right here, but I don't mind. We're just going to cut straight across. And then we'll let that meet up at a clean 90 degree. Now this collector road is going to serve as the main street for this part of the city. Continue mirroring this. We're going to use the same trick we used over there. And just draw this down to this guideline. And now, because we have this collector road, we don't want too many junctions close to each other. So I'm going to leave this one empty and just drag this one in. And it looks like we're having some issues with power and water. So our electricity availability is just underneath, but we can come into our budget here and we can raise this back up to 100%. This should help in the short term. And let's do the same with our water. Another issue with water is we don't have enough sewage. So we're going to place another one of these drain pipes right here. And we're running out of money, so we're going to zone everything now. So my demand right now is for residential, so that's what I'm going to primarily focus on. Next, we're going to be looking at Deathcare. This service is crucial. If dead bodies pile up in the city, the rotting corpses will make existing residents sick and die themselves. Ignoring Deathcare will eventually kill everyone in your city, and we don't want that. We need a solid road network and good planning to make sure that Deathcare as a service can function at its full potential. So right now, we actually don't have enough money for any cemeteries, but that's okay. We can always take out a second loan. I think Deathcare is one of those things that's very important to invest in, and if you need a loan for it, you should take it out. So right now, all we have is cemeteries. So think of Deathcare as similar to garbage. Cemeteries and crematoriums need to be placed evenly throughout your city so that the hearses have access to every neighborhood. These can be placed anywhere as they don't generate any noise or pollution, so it's okay to place them in residential neighborhoods. So similar to garbage, police, and fire, you'll see the coverage on these roads here, and the roads that are green are the places that your cemetery's hearses can reach. Over time, this will take care of the dead body problem. So we're still having some issues with water here. So now might be a good time to invest in another water tower. But we don't want it here anymore because there's too much residential. So we're going to put a water tower in this new area over here. It has access to a power line and it won't cause any problems with the existing residents with noise pollution. And we'll just connect it up there. Next, we want to think about our industrial again because we do have a lot of industrial demand. And I think this area is a good place to continue placing industrial zones as there's enough commercial to buffer it from the residential zones. We'll create a few more blocks here and we'll do bigger blocks this time. Once again, we're out of money. That's okay. We can always make more. Whenever you make a large investment in your city and you're low on cash, a good thing to do is to zone out as much as you can because it is free. And the more people that move in will increase your tax revenue. Another thing we can do is look at our budget again. So we don't want to mess with our power and water too much because we're growing fast. It looks like the water pumping can come down a little bit, but we're not going to go too far with it. Healthcare we can afford to bring down to about 94% before we start causing too many problems. We'll also reduce our park budget by just a little bit. And of course, this is a common issue we see with new players. When they expand too fast, they run out of money. And then you get stuck with stuff like this, where you don't have enough water for all of the zones that you've made. So just keep an eye on it and continue to put the pipes that you can afford as you generate the cash. Another thing that we can afford to decrease a little bit is our road budget. Road maintenance will cause some issues and it'll slow traffic a little bit, but it's worth it to save a little bit of money to lower that budget. One thing you don't want to touch is your fire budget. If you have that too low, your city will burn down. Police? We don't want to touch this either. As our jail capacity is still relatively low, and as you can see we're over half full, we don't want those criminals running free, so let's keep the police well funded. This is another common issue we see a lot. Not enough customers. Basically what this means is we have too much commercial and there's not enough people that live nearby to actually go and use the store. So one way to remedy that is just to continue zoning residential nearby. So while we're waiting for the city to make money, let's look at our info views. We can look at pollution, and this will show you your average ground pollution in each area. Ground pollution is generated by uses such as garbage and industry, and if you have water towers on them, this will kill your city. So water pollution is the same. It's basically water. And placing water pumps anywhere in this area will also kill your city. Next, let's look at noise pollution. So noise pollution is generated by uses such as freeways, industry, and water towers, and power plants. Anything in red is going to generate significant noise pollution. The darker the color, the more pronounced it is. Residents don't like to live next to areas with high noise pollution, and you can often use trees as a buffer to help shield from some of that noise pollution. We're going to go ahead and do that here next to these water towers. I don't need to be very extensive with it. I'm just selecting random trees to buffer some of the noise. We're also going to do this here along this main couplet, but I'm going to be a little more thoughtful about what I choose. Because it's a beach city, we're going to continue with my favorite little California palms. And in between, we're going to do rows of wild hedges. And then top it off with a couple of young lindens. Trees are great for decorating the empty spaces in your city and adding a little bit of flair. They also help to increase land value and make citizens happier. So abandoned buildings can be an issue for your city. This one died because it didn't have enough customers. So all we're going to do is delete that. Because we don't have a lot of commercial demand, you can either just right-click and dezone it and replace it with residential, or you can just leave it and let it grow later. So now we're just going to continue building out this grid back here. That way we have room for more industry. One issue we're having is with education. Because we've cut the funding, we don't have enough capacity for our students, which means we're not getting as many educated workers. Because we can't afford a school, but we are making a little bit of profit, we can up this education budget quite a bit. We'll just do it to 100%. And that'll give us a little more capacity for students, so over time, we'll gain more educated workers. We're still a little low, and when we get more money, we can build a school. Now we do have some commercial demand, so to create a nice little buffer, I'm going to fill these two blocks out with commercial. This will help shield a lot of the residential from some of these noxious industrial uses. Another cool thing I like to do is use a lot of walking paths. So these paths are great for blocks this size, and they'll help to fill in the empty spaces, and they'll make for a nicer neighborhood and also enable people to walk directly to their jobs. And as you can see, we're having some issues with power out here, so we have two options. We can't really afford another coal power plant, but we can do wind. The thing with wind is, we need to look at the parts of the city where this is the darkest. So that's wind. So this is our estimated production. We want to get it to 8 megawatts, which is the most power that a windmill can generate. If you don't put it in an area with strong wind, you'll produce less. So now we're making quite a bit of money, so we can just run this at full speed and sit with it. So I've saved this area for something special. What we're going to do is create our own little park here. If you have the Park Life DLC, you can create your own custom functional park, but I'm going to introduce that in a later episode. We're just going to create one ourselves with some nice paths. And these gravel paths can actually connect directly onto the existing park assets. It's important to give your citizens lots of green space to enjoy the city. And having this beautiful park in the center of town will help to increase land value and bring in more profitable homes and businesses, and already you can see people using the path. Now we have a whole bunch of residential demand, so let's actually expand the city out even further. Keep on going with this curving pattern. We always need to check our water to make sure there's adequate coverage and bring them under the roads just like this. They don't have to be perfectly aligned, but if you want to, you can actually use these guides here. And if you turn off all of the snapping, you can come in here real close and then you can kind of freeform it. Now let's zone the heck out of this area and bring in some people. I'm going to leave this space for a little bit of commercial. These homes should not be that close to industry. I made that mistake. So we're going to dezone that and put commercial instead. The commercial demand isn't there yet, but it'll come. If you notice, a lot of these zones aren't growing. That's because we haven't provided adequate service to bring the land value up high enough. To look at your land value, we're going to go here. The entire city has extremely low land value. When your land value is low, not only will you generate less tax revenue, but people are less likely to want to live there. So if you zone residential in an area with low land value, they're going to take a little longer to grow. Another issue we're having here is with our garbage. So our garbage processing status is still poor. And one thing that we've done that's not good is located all of the garbage at the very edge of the city in one location. So the trucks have to drive from here all the way out to the end. So good practice, like Deathcare and industry, is to also spread your garbage out relatively evenly throughout the city. So we're gonna come over here to this end of town, and we're gonna make sure that we can fit a nice little landfill back here. I want it a little ways away from the main road. So we're gonna put it right there for now. And that'll give us another space from which garbage trucks can patrol the city. And we're gonna put one more. And this isn't the best location for it because we have a lot of housing, but we're gonna come quite a bit out. So that's quite a long range of pollution. So we wanna make sure that we don't place too much residential here, but at least now the city will have adequate garbage processing coverage for the foreseeable future. It's important to have commercial spread out through your city as well, and I think it's nice and creates a more walkable city if you have commercial within close distance of your residential zones, and even a few here spread out within the neighborhood. That way people can get a bite to eat, they can go to the liquor store, or whatever they want to do. They'll have easy access to commercial within their neighborhood. So because this area already has the garbage here, it could be potentially another good place for some more industry. I think it's a good time to add another elementary school, and I want to use this area as sort of a school campus. So we're going to start by putting this elementary school right here. Because schools often have recreation next to them, we're going to add a couple of basketball courts. That'll really help increase the land value as well. Behind it, we're going to do a little path complex. Another thing we've unlocked the ability to use is child health centers and elder care centers. So child health care helps increase the birth rate and offers citizens to children and teens improving their health. I think this is a great complementary use to the school, so we're actually going to put this back here. And as things grow, we can put more nice little goodies in this space. And look at that, we hit busy town. So we get level 4 unique buildings as well as a number of different DLC stuff, which we'll get into in another episode. We've also unlocked lots of new roads and higher capacity service buildings, power plants, and a whole bunch of new park buildings. So now that we have quite a bit of money, and our power is always lacking, we're going to play around with this oil power plant. This is going to generate a lot more power. It costs us $50,000, so we're going to be out of money once we use it. But I think it's a worthy investment in the future of the city. What I want to do now is delete this industry. We don't really need it here. And it's just causing problems in the center of all this residential. And we're going to replace it with another nice little park. I think a dog park would be great, and around it, we'll connect it up with some paths. Another great place for some trees to make the city feel a little more alive is right here. It takes a little bit of finagling, but you could place trees within this little tiny gap. And now we just changed this ugly, dirty industry into a beautiful little dog park. I like to save empty spaces like this for little detailed parks, so we're gonna build another one because this area really needs it. And we're sticking with the base game parks for now until a later episode when I get into the DLCs. And then add in the little concrete paths. And what you can do is use your guidelines to make a little more free-form winding path. When you turn off your guidelines, you won't hit any of the snap twos, and it'll make it much easier to draw things out accordingly. We can also play with props. So there's lots of little props that we can use for detailing up even further. One I really like is this cute little gazebo. These just bring a little more life to your open spaces. I'm gonna put it here. And props can be found in the park menu, so we're gonna add a couple little benches here too. And the cool thing is you can actually use the props to detail up any space you want. I really like these beer garden benches. They look like picnic tables. We can just put a few throughout this little park area, as well as some little playground equipment. Little props like this just sort of bring it to life and add more detail. I'm not going all out on this. I'm normally a heavy detailer, but I just wanted to show you a few for demonstration purposes. Let's do something a little more unique here with the road layout. Instead of connecting everything up together in a grid pattern, we're going to do a more organic layout, sort of similar to American suburbs. These 3 collector roads are sort of the borders of the neighborhood, and between them we're going to make a nice little suburb with tree-lined streets. The thing with a lot of suburbs in the United States is they're designed to minimize through traffic. So we keep that in mind when we're planning the layouts, typically minimizing the occurrence of 4-way intersections. I'm actually going to start with one of these median roads, sort of the entrance. We're going to keep this side entirely free of connections, but we're going to add one here as well. And now we'll draw out various patterns, keeping them relatively square, but not necessarily linking up in any logical way. Suburbs tend to develop in patterns like this, where the local streets really don't go anywhere, and in order to leave the neighborhood, you have to go out to the main collector. In many suburbs, it's very common for schools to be at the center. And we don't need a lot of schools, but there's almost no coverage of the actual school. And we're gonna build a little school right here. When building a new neighborhood, I typically check all of the services to make sure that there is some coverage, especially to make something a little higher land value like this. We wanna make sure we have everything covered. Another thing we haven't touched on yet is elder care. It actually helps extend the lifespan of elderly people within the radius of the building and really helps health for the whole city get better. So this little block is the perfect space. And on either side of it, we're gonna detail it up quite nicely. Now, let's go ahead and zone all of this with residential. Another cool trick to know is that you can actually change the trees that are along these roads by selecting a tree and just clicking it. For this area, I do want housing. It'll look really ugly if we just leave this space empty and bare. So I do want to put paths in. And what I like to do is draw them sort of through these awkwardly shaped zone squares so that we have a nicer fit for the stuff that we do have. And you can also access fences here. And I actually don't want anything on this side. And that'll give us a nice clean row of blocks. This one's not perfect, but I'm still gonna zone it. Now we'll have houses that'll come in a little better. While we're at it, let's look at our traffic. So we are starting to get some traffic problems here. And one good way to deal with traffic is public transit, which we have unlocked. So we have a bus depot, and buses are the simplest form of public transit. Where you're gonna wanna place the bus depot is somewhat out of the way, but still a place where the buses will have enough access to actually get to the bus routes. So I'm thinking right here is a great spot for it. And now with that, we've unlocked the ability to create bus lines. And this is where the fun comes in. So the bus lines we need to create are going to be places people want to go. And that will help with a lot of the traffic. So the first bus line I'm thinking that we do is actually going to be along this road. And we're just going to place a few stops. Not there though. We're going to start here. And you just click to place them. And I recommend doing every few blocks or so. And then go along and make sure the stops are relatively mirrored. So these are going kind of a circuitous route because they can't go that way under the freeway. So what we're going to do is actually move these stops. We're going to complete the line and then drag them over here. So that way they go around in a clean circle. The next most important routes that we want to consider are other highly trafficked roads. It's going to this traffic routes. And if we check, we can see where people are going. So we see there's a good desired path here to here because this is where much of our industry is. And this is where much of our residential and commercial are. Another good location for a bus route is going to be along this other collector road here. Sims will walk quite a bit, so if their destination is a few blocks away, that's okay. It's also important to have some synergy between these stops, so we're going to place this one right here in between the two. And then for now, we'll just let it loop out there. We can change these as the city grows. I think there's some benefit in adding a stop here because there is a lot of industrial here and it's at the end of the line anyway. And we just hit Big Town. The really big one that's exciting is office zones. So offices function similar to industry. They actually feed off of the industrial demand, but they require highly educated workers. And we have a whole ton of money. So we can actually invest in a university to bring in educated workers to allow us to populate our offices. We have a lot of demand for this. So now we could use the campus DLC, which enables you to build a very large university campus, but we're going to start with the vanilla base game ones and get into that in another episode. And I'm thinking we can build out a nice little area for it right here. It's a little uneven, but it's okay. We'll live with it. And by the university, I do want a couple of basketball courts. They'll help increase land value. Next, we have a ton of demand for commercial and residential. So I'm gonna build out another neighborhood here. We've also unlocked high density at this point. We could put high density here. So higher density brings in more people and jobs. And I think at some point we can actually start upgrading some of our central city to high density residential. So let's get rid of all of this and we're gonna switch it out to high density, which will bring in some taller buildings into the city and actually really help us grow. I'm imagining this area becoming sort of a downtown for the city. And as it grows over time, we'll start to see higher rise buildings come in. But in order to really max this out, we need to make sure all of the services that we have are here. I think it's okay to plan for the future and actually include a nice little hospital as well. It costs quite a bit of money, but it's gonna make people happy. This is a bit of a problem. We have citizens that are sick because they're way too close to the industry. Industry is becoming a bit outdated anyway. We're gonna get rid of that. We're gonna start zoning office. It won't all come in right away, but it'll give a nice buffer between the nastier industrial uses. So now I see another opportunity to make an interesting connection here, is we're gonna actually connect this up and create another couplet because it's starting to get pretty busy. Another cool thing that we can do is on our main roads that have buses, we can actually add bus lanes so that the buses have their own dedicated lane, and that helps a lot with transit. It'll make the buses move faster and encourage more people to take it. And because a lot of this dirty industry is becoming abandoned, we're going to get rid of it. And in its place, we're going to put a mix of commercial and office. And over time, those will disappear. I'll let them stay for now, but as newer buildings pop up, we'll see them be redeveloped. We're having issues with not enough workers and not enough educated workers. Not enough workers can be solved by just continuing to bring in more housing near the places of work. Not enough educated workers takes a little more time as we need to educate everybody in the city. So let's make sure our education is okay. It is not. We need more elementary schools. This is the large elementary school from the Heart of Korea pack. And I think it's going to go well here because we have a lot of high density and it'll really up our education for now. Also, this school just looks so cool. If you haven't checked out the Heart of Korea pack, you really should. It's not for everybody, but there is some interesting buildings there. In the back here, we're gonna put a couple of basketball courts. Looks like we can only fit one for now, but we could do Paradox Plaza. Just having something next to the school, like an athletics field and a little place for people to gather, just gives a little bit of extra visual interest. So let's look at our traffic flow because it's still pretty good at 92%. We do have some issues here, but they are clearing themselves up as it's just new people moving into the high density areas. But one of the reasons we haven't had such an issue is we could have started with something a little more glamorous, like a roundabout or some sort of interchange. And while that would be great, the solution to good traffic was good planning. If you look at our zones, the industry is not all in one place. There's little nodes of it here and here, so people aren't all going to one location. And we had some over here before, and we've replaced it with office, and we've got the commercial pretty evenly distributed as well, with residential sort of in between it all. Making sure that all of your zones are evenly spread throughout the city helps with the traffic flow quite a bit, more so than anything else. And once we brought in transit and buses, and brought them along efficient routes where people want to go, it helped take some of the cars off the road in the main areas. And look at that, we hit small city. So we've unlocked quite a bit here, and it's mostly DLC stuff, but the really fun one is train. And we're gonna get to that in the next episode. Up next, I'm gonna show you a cool trick to make your very own maps to play on using real-world height data. So click here to watch, and don't forget to subscribe for new episodes of Sandy Beach.